Salut, ladies and gentlemen. Hello, hello. I'm Mark, and this is Several Books. Today, what I'm going to be doing is perhaps a sink or swim moment for my YouTube channel. I'm going to be doing Cormac McCarthy. I wouldn't have done Cormac McCarthy today, except that I was notified that there were several new Cormac McCarthy videos. And I like Cormac McCarthy. You've seen me wear author print t-shirts before, book-themed t-shirts, and it's significant that although I like Cormac McCarthy and I have t-shirts dedicated to books, the t-shirt I'm wearing today is a plain bluish green t-shirt. I don't have a Cormac McCarthy t-shirt, and that's because I'm not a Cormac McCarthy ride or die fellow. I'm somebody who started reading Cormac McCarthy probably about 15 years ago. I read his books over the course of that time. I had about 5 or 6 that I hadn't read until more recently. And that was, for instance, the Border Trilogy and the last 2 I hadn't really touched. I like him okay. He's interesting. He's not my favorite writer. I do think that he deserves all his accolades. He's won a National Book Award and a Pulitzer. I tend to prefer the National Book Award, but it's still a very big deal that somebody wins a Pulitzer. And I understand why he's liked online. The stories are pretty gritty, they're action-filled, and they're dark. So that's basically my experience with Cormac McCarthy. And you see that there are people on YouTube who are making their entire channels basically dedicated to McCarthy, and I can't do that. I don't know his biography better than some of the people, and I don't know all of his philosophic takes. If I need to justify myself in terms of my philosophy knowledge, as I said, I've read a lot of these books, and these are philosophy and theory. I read most of them. So I know Wittgenstein pretty well. A personal note, when I was in college, I once wrote a paper on the Tractatus and tried to cram it into a segment of the Bible. And I almost failed my class because of that paper. That's my experience with Wittgenstein. My teacher didn't care that I had read Wittgenstein. My teacher wanted a paper on the Bible. So that's where I'm coming from. A lot of this stuff is familiar to me, but it's not necessarily my primary interest. So, Cormac McCarthy. He wrote a number of novels. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I've got 12 novels. I've read all 12 novels, and I haven't read his plays that are also published. I think that brings that out to 15 books. I'm not super interested in it. When I like playwrights, which I do, I'm very interested. A more contemporary playwright is the playwright Sarah Kane, for instance, or Harold Pinter. England has some great playwrights that are very interesting. I'm also very into a few plays by Shakespeare. I've read the first folio. I've read all of Moliere, as I've said before. So it's not that I'm not interested in plays. It's that I think there are more... If Cormac McCarthy's plays are his movies, then there are probably plays that interest me more than the stuff that has been turned into movies. So now that I've put down Cormac McCarthy and alienated my audience, I can beg for forgiveness and begin to start talking about Cormac McCarthy from the perspective of somebody who likes his novels, thinks he's pretty cool, is not ready to latch himself to the Cormac McCarthy bandwagon. The other big name author who I'm going to be doing soon is Don DeLillo. I'm a bigger fan of Don DeLillo than Cormac McCarthy. A writer who I like Cormac McCarthy, but who I think is different, is Robert Stone. I might do a video on Robert Stone, but there are a few of his books, two, that are about international politics, and I worry that bringing that into the channel would make things negative for people. I don't want to force that down anybody's throat, and there are things that if the novels were written 30 years ago and he's writing about international politics, you don't know how that's going to be taken. All right, so Cormac McCarthy. The first of his novels is The Orchard Keeper. What can I say about The Orchard Keeper? There isn't really a central character in The Orchard Keeper. There's a murder in The Orchard Keeper. Other than that, the way I would describe most of these novels that tend to jump around different characters is to say that they illuminate place more so than a specific action. This was the last Cormac McCarthy novel I read. His first one was the last one I read. If this was the only Cormac McCarthy novel I had ever read, or if I was introduced to this, I would have thought it was an okay book, but I probably would not have read more than another novel or two unless that novel was either Blood Meridian or Suttree. So my favorite are Blood Meridian and Suttree. I don't really know what else to say about this other than that it's dark. There's a murder. I don't agree that this is a very good book. I think it's an okay showing for a first novel, but it's not, in my opinion, something that's going to tell us a lot about what happens later in his career. So this is a C book for me. I don't mean that as a slight to any of the huge Cormac McCarthy fans who are into all of his novels, but this is a C book. It's okay. Not great. Not bad. You might like it. I would have liked more of a coherent main character. The place that you're getting information about is not totally radical. So it's just kind of okay. Lots of different characters. The second Cormac McCarthy book is Outer Dark, and I love this novel. And I think that's an unusual opinion. I think that part of the reason why I love this novel is that the characters are illiterate. I think it's very interesting to read a book about characters who cannot read themselves. The novel is very dark. It involves the child of incest who a brother attempts to murder. And we see some of Cormac McCarthy's famed biblical allusions in this book. The novel is I don't remember whether it's entirely from the perspective of of the woman who has the incest child, but I think it's almost entirely from her perspective. I know that some people don't like this book as much as I do, but I would rate this probably as a between a B and an A showing. I'm a big fan of the book. It's not my favorite. It's not Cormac McCarthy's best. But if you... I like reading back catalogs of writers. That's the whole idea behind reading these entire reviews for people. And if you're okay with reading a novel and having it not be earth-shattering, having it not be the best thing you've ever read, but just be something fun to read, and you like it and it's cool, like it doesn't have to be any more than that, this is your book. This is the unsung bastion of light for Cormac McCarthy. Outer Dark, second novel, much better than his first. So let's give that yeah, between a B and an A tier. The third novel we have is Child of God. And Child of God is loved online. The main character of the book is a murderer and a necrophiliac and a whole lot of other things. There are really strong parts of the writing in this book, but what I'm going to say is that I don't actually like all of the way that it's organized. I would have liked probably to have seen certain things that Ballard did. I don't want to see everything in the grittiest of detail. That's not what I'm saying. But the way it's organized, the ending is kind of appended on. It's like an addition. It terminates the story. It does very well certain things. And I'm not saying that Cormac McCarthy doesn't execute a novel obviously significantly better than anything I could write. But this is not my favorite. I would say this is a solid B. And I am saying that I prefer Outer Dark to Child of God. So Child of God is a good book. When it really comes down to it, if you're talking about murdering the child of incest or necrophilia as you get here, the idea that this is darker and so better than Child of God, for instance, is a bit, it's spurious. It's wrong, and it doesn't equate to very much. The lengthy descriptions of scene in Outer Dark are chef's kiss. Even for a beginning novel, like there's some great descriptions of the environment. You don't get anything like that in Child of God. We get some great wordplay. You know, not wordplay, but like poetic rhythms and lines. There are some really strong parts in here, but I just don't agree that this is just inherently so much better than Outer Dark. So that's a B. The next book, Suttree. Now, I think this is probably actually McCarthy's best novel. This and Blood Meridian are the toss-up, but for me, the way that I want to describe this novel is somewhere between a book like a Thomas Mann, like this kind of old-style, epic, not necessarily family story, but something like that, with philosophical discussions and all of this this brilliant dialogue and something like Faulkner. Part of me was reminded of John Steinbeck when I read this book. If anybody's read Tortilla Flat, the characters in that book are like living in a woods, and you get these great descriptions of a hobo life, and we're getting that here. Reading this book made me feel sweaty, and I mean that as a compliment. I read the book, and I was transported to a world of hot heat, and all sorts of things like that. There are some absolutely hilarious parts. I don't want to give too much away. If you've never read the book, I'm just going to say there's a part about watermelons that will probably have you rolling on the floor laughing. There is also, as it is Cormac McCarthy, murder and complete darkness in certain areas. This is an S tier book. I can't praise this enough. For me, this is his best novel as a traditional novel. Blood Meridian has really good stuff going for it, and that's the next book. But this was just something else altogether. So that's our S tier. Our second S tier is Blood Meridian. And what I'm going to say about Blood Meridian is that I am shocked this book is as popular as it is. I like the book a lot, and I don't want to make it sound like, oh, I'm the special literary guy, and therefore my taste is somehow more advanced than others. The reason it surprises me that this book is more popular than his other books is that there's really only one character who talks in this book, and that's the judge. All of the other conversation kind of falls by the wayside. And the kid is an unnamed character. So he's kind of a stand-in that's more us than if than the primary character was a first-person narrator. He's the kid. We're sort of all the kid when we read this book. So it really puts us into this perspective, and he's showing us this view not exactly of society, but of society in the sense that he's showing us a world that people did live in. It was war-torn, even if it wasn't necessarily a named war. There was mass slaughter, there was debauchery, there was all of the negative violence and things that we associate with that. And so what surprises me is that if I'm going to talk about a book in relation to Blood Meridian, I'm likely to harken back to European classics like, for instance, a novel by Samuel Beckett. And I found out that Cormac McCarthy did not like Samuel Beckett. So the books that I would think of as being important to Outer Dark, which are these books that explore the realm of absurdity, because we're getting a lot of absurdity and violence in this novel. Cormac McCarthy just didn't care about them. They were not his focus. He was not super interested in them. He was interested in Moby Dick. He's not talking about great experimental novels. Believe it or not, I would say that maybe a book similar to this would be Invisible Man by Ralph Waldo Ellison. And that's because of the way that the narrator kind of stands in for a certain ethos, and in a way also becomes us, and we're seeing these different aspects of a society. But I'm just surprised that this is as popular as it is. If I were to choose one book I would most relate this to, it's the Iliad, Homer's Iliad. And the Iliad is primarily a poem talking about a war. And so we're constantly getting different scenes of conflict in the Iliad. And the amount of violence in this book is basically like Iliad conflicts on steroids. We're getting extra discussion of blood and guts. So we get that ancient style narrative mixed with an experimental narrator and really only one character who talks. I mean, there are other characters, there are conversations in the novel, but the novel is primarily a vehicle for delivery of this satanic judge. And so that just to me doesn't seem like the kind of book that everybody and their mother is going to be super interested in. I'm just surprised. It's way more experimental than basically the rest of his work, and I am blown away that this has become the Cormac McCarthy for the masses. I think that he's got great books for the masses. I'm not saying I'm special, but there are books that are much more accessible. One thing I want to say is I talked to somebody who had read this book, and it just completely bounced off him. He didn't care for it at all. And I tried to explain to this guy that the book is really experimental. It's a surprise to me that so many people like it. It doesn't surprise me at all that it didn't do great when it got started. That doesn't mean it's a bad book. All sorts of classics were completely ignored by critics. William Gaddis, there was a book written about how it's absurd that critics ignored William Gaddis when he got started. But this whole book is like the Iliad. It's violence after violence after violence. There's not really a main character as such. The main character is a stand-in for our view of the world. We're getting blatant absurdity about life, so it's depressing as all hell. And the only character who really talks is this satanic figure who delivers these very long speeches. This is an S-tier book in my book. I agree with everybody on YouTube. I'm just surprised that this has taken off quite as much as it has. So my two best books by Cormac McCarthy came out back to back. It's Suttree and Blood Meridian. I'm going to review the entire Border Trilogy as one. So, All the Pretty Horses won a National Book Award. It's a solid book. Two guys go into Mexico and encounter this kid who seems to like kind of look up to him, and he's probably riding a stolen horse. And they end up in a Mexican prison. The kid winds up dead with the probably stolen horse. Horses are traded and stolen. And what I want to say about the book is that it's not the nicest portrait of Mexico. Mexico looks like a very lawless land in this. This is a good novel. I'm going to probably say the whole trilogy is like an A+. Our second book is Two Brothers. Again, kind of roaming around the Southwest. And there's horse stealing. The one brother becomes a folk hero to a group of ranchers, I guess you call them. The cowboys, the actual cowboys, from Mexico who do all of the manual labor. They view this little boy as a folk hero because he dies trying to get away with some stuff and whatever. He gets shot, and the Piquito guerrier, whatever, that's the French word for warrior. I don't remember the Spanish word. There's a lot of Spanish in here. I like that. I like it when I see languages in books and I can understand what's being said without knowing the language. So I don't know. I know like 5 words in Spanish. I took it in high school and I didn't care. I speak French now, but I've never taken a language class in French. So this is an A+ book. There's some really great stories, some frame narratives toward the end of this book that I want to stress. It will make it worth reading. The book does sag a bit at times. The final, I'll say the names afterwards because I'm just showing you the cover. Cities of the Plain. I thought this was a solid way to top off the trilogy. I really view the trilogy as one work, similar with the way that I reviewed William Burroughs by looking at trilogies as one group. I'm going to be pairing books together with that. I thought this was a great book. I thought the trilogy was a great book. This specific part of the trilogy just adds the end of it. The survivor from both situations, basically, of the 2 previous novels grouped together, and they're working together, and the one falls in love with a prostitute. She's murdered, and stuff happens. Put all together, it's an A+ book. This is between an A and an S tier. I think that it's All the Pretty Horses, The Crossing, and Cities of the Plain. Other interesting things that we see are the way that military recruitment works. I think his name's Billy, tries to enlist several times and is turned away for health issues. It is probably the only way he could have escaped his situation by conventional means, to join the military and get out and go, try his hand after getting out of the military. Military service is rough for people. People make tremendous sacrifices, and when they get back, they're not always welcomed into society, which is just terrible. But there is a sort of American dream where a person joins the military, comes out, and they can find good work and begin to make a home for themselves. and so that's denied Billy. So that was his only real chance. So he's condemned to his rancher lawlessness. So good stuff about this book. It exemplifies Cormac McCarthy's style. I don't agree that these are softer than his other works. When I was looking at McCarthy, I got this copy way earlier used than my other two copies of this book, of this trilogy. And I was told that this was like the soft side of Cormac McCarthy. Killing people in a Mexican prison is not the soft side of anyone, and that's in these books. So I don't even know like who was doing whatever to think that this is the soft side of anyone. There are murders. Okay, so there's not a murder on every page as we get with Blood Meridian, which quite seriously has like a murder on almost every page for long sections of the book. 3/4 of the pages of the whole book have a murder on them, but we don't get that in these books. But I don't agree at all that this is the soft side of anyone. This is not a romance. The closest thing that we get to a conventional romance in Cormac McCarthy is a murdered prostitute. So that's where I am with this. This is an A+ showing. Between A and S. I wouldn't quite say it's at the tier with the other two, and I know that means that I'm ranking trilogies by William Burroughs as very significant when I'm only giving that to 2 here, or that I have 4 books by Richard Yates which appear on an S tier. And I'm serious, I think Richard Yates is probably a better novelist than Cormac McCarthy. But you're kind of, it's kissing cousins or whatever. You're splitting hairs. Both of these guys had so many works that were so valuable, and Cormac McCarthy wrote, is it 12? He wrote 12 novels. So I mean, if I tell you that the trilogy, which is 3 books, is A+, and I tell you go out and read it, it's great. Don't stop, just read it. Yeah, that's fine. And I'm not the biggest Cormac McCarthy fan. Like I'm not wearing the Cormac McCarthy T-shirt. He's a great writer. Everybody likes him too. I mean, if you're a dude, I don't know. We're gonna review Alfred Jelinek, who is a controversial Nobel Prize winner, and I'm mentioning her because she has a little more following, I've noticed, with women on the tube than say Clarice Lispector. But what I'm basically getting at here is that if you're somebody who likes dark stories, this is Cormac McCarthy. The person who actually got me interested in Cormac McCarthy was a woman I met in college. I was doing this all in one take, which I realize is probably not for the best, but we just talked about the Border Trilogy, and now we're into his 2 probably most well-known works. And Cormac McCarthy's 2 most well-known works are books that I don't think are great. The first of those is No Country for Old Men. I like the movie. It's not the movie that epitomizes that time, 2010-ish, say, or is it 2007? Somewhere in that period. I know that No Country for Old Men is considered kind of the best film of that epoch. The other opinion we often see on what's the best film of that epoch is There Will Be Blood. Now, I haven't read Oil, which is the novel that became There Will Be Blood, but I love the movie There Will Be Blood. I think it's an incredible film. No Country for Old Men is a great film. I've seen things online about how Chigurh is like the best sociopath in movie history. And that might be the case. There's some really solid parts of that movie, but it's just not. I would rather see Daniel Day-Lewis, his cold calculations, than Chigurh's ruthless murder spree. So what we got here is is No Country for Old Men, and the movie is almost comically, to me, often interpreted basically as a movie script in and of itself. What I would say to think of like that is maybe Graham Greene's work. The Third Man, the old movie, was written as a novella first, and it was never intended to be released. And after he wrote the novella, he took the movie script from it, and they turned that movie script into a great film, classic cinema. What I would say about this is that even when this was written, I thought it was strange that this is Llewellyn is with a 17-year-old girl, and or 18. She's a teenager, and he's like in his mid-40s. And now that we know who Cormac McCarthy is in his personal life, and that he pursued relationships or a major relationship with a young woman, that should shed some light on this. I think that the actor Lee, whatever, his ending monologue works better as a capstone for a novel to finish the story than it does in the movie, changing the perspective again. The novel's good. As with Blood Meridian, when I read this book, I think of the theater of the absurd. I think of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead. There's a scene in that play where they're constantly flipping a coin, and it's constantly turning up heads or tails. And we've got Sugar running around to various people, flipping a coin at them. And am I going to kill you or not? Heads or tails? It seems to me, reading this, like that's a ham-fisted reference. I don't know how else you're supposed to interpret that as but a reference to Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead and Theater of the Absurd. And I don't know how you're supposed to interpret McCarthy as anything but an outgrowth of Samuel Beckett. But as I said with Blood Meridian, McCarthy has said that he didn't care much for Beckett. And Beckett even fulfilled McCarthy's criteria that literature should primarily be about death. If you read McCarthy's books, almost every book contains, I think every one does contain a murder. So there's a high body count in McCarthy's books. And Beckett, coming out of Proust, even though he was very different than Proust, does contain deaths in basically all of his books, or grueling situations that are close to death. And that absurdity, I would think that would be right up McCarthy's wheelhouse. Whereas he complained about Proust because he kind of wondered, what's the point? You don't have people grappling with these sins around murder and so forth. So I'm not entirely sure what more to say about this. I think this is a C novel. This is my McCarthy C tier. The book is fun. It's entertaining. I don't have any desire to revisit it. I kind of do now that I'm making the video. Like, maybe I should reread it. I think I read it in an evening. But I read it when the movie came out. Me and a friend read it and talked about it. And he was getting super into McCarthy, and I read a couple. But I don't have a whole lot else to say. I do know that McCarthy's movie scripts were not as successful as his novels, and I think his style of dialogue, sometimes being a little flat and echoey, might not always translate into great film. But other than that, it's a solid book. It's fun to read, but I wouldn't recommend this to anybody. I would recommend this the way I would recommend a John Grisham novel or a Michael Crichton Jurassic Park. Yeah, it's a fun book. It's a good book to read on an airplane. You can go to the beach, maybe. I don't know. It's been years since I've been to the beach, but you can go to the beach and read it. You'll enjoy it. But as far as the great Cormac McCarthy goes, he's not really showing up in this novel. The next book is It's the Road. To me, this is not as good as everybody makes it out to be. Of all the books that McCarthy could have won a Pulitzer for, I felt a bit like they gave him a Pulitzer because the broader public started to recognize how awesome Blood Meridian was, and they needed to make sure that McCarthy was recognized fairly. Now that said, The Road is a solid book. I can't comment on the movie. I didn't see it, but there's a following around post-apocalyptic and utopian stories, and I've seen it online that oftentimes teenagers, young men especially, will latch on to the dystopian novels and the post-apocalyptic novels and consider them the epitome of the intellectual fruits of the novel. And in my experience, and I am a bit older, and I've read, let's say a couple tens of books, over there at least, a couple tens. I've read a lot of books. That's all I'm saying. And I tend to think of the great intellectual novels like, check out Dostoevsky. There's nothing wrong with Dostoevsky. I know that there are a lot of people who will tell you Dostoevsky is bad, and that there's a following around Dostoevsky online that people don't want to be associated with, even though he's a classic. But like, Dostoevsky's novels are they're great. So there's nothing wrong with Dostoevsky. If you're talking about intellectual fruits, go find Dostoevsky or Thomas Mann, or there are any number of writers who write these masterpieces. Cormac McCarthy's parallel for that, in my opinion, is Suttree. I would say check out Suttree. You're getting philosophical discussion. It's not on the level of the judge's long monologues, but you're getting philosophical discussion. You're seeing aspects of the world in a whole new light. You're being brought into an environment that is, for most people, totally alien. I've never lived essentially homeless on a boat. That's not anything I have experience with. And so we've got The Road. And what is it? You got to keep the fire lit, or so on and so forth. We've got a few motivational phrases. We see people living in the absolute destitution of the future. And what creates the novel is a story between a father and a son. And I wouldn't have seen even that much for it, except that I saw a YouTuber point that out recently. So I understand why this is a good novel, but this would not have been a Pulitzer win for me if I was on the Pulitzer board. I would have been like, come on, can we get something about America? The Pulitzer's supposed to be about the American narrative. And I don't see the American narrative in this. I see a story of a father and son in a post-apocalyptic world that doesn't represent our current state in the U.S. and hasn't represented the U.S. as long as I have lived in the U.S., which is my entire life except for a few months. I don't see that here. I see a post-apocalyptic novel. I think it's a very good story. I think it's solid. There's a lot of Cormac McCarthy darkness and violence. But for me, this is a C-tier book. So shots fired. I just said The Road was one of his worst books. He doesn't have anything below a C-tier. That goes far for Cormac McCarthy. I found a D tier for Kathy Aker, and I would rather read Kathy Aker than Cormac McCarthy. But yeah, this is not the epitome of Cormac McCarthy for me. And this doesn't rank on any list for me for books that you have to read. So again, I kind of came to Cormac McCarthy at my own risk, despite having so many author print t-shirts and literary t-shirts. I'm wearing plain today to represent that I don't have one from Cormac McCarthy, and I'm a big Cormac McCarthy fan, but I don't have it. Um, but yeah, the Road, in my opinion, not a great novel. Pretty good, better than a lot, but it's just, so what? The last McCarthy novel is a two-volume masterpiece from the best-selling Pulitzer Prize-winning author of The Road. This doesn't relate to The Road at all. Most of Cormac McCarthy's novels don't relate to The Road, and maybe that's partially why I don't like The Road. But this is a good book. These two books are one book, really. I think you could read The Passenger by itself. I think that Stella Maris adds a lot of context to it. I don't think you can read Stella Maris by itself. You have to read The Passenger and then Stella Maris. So it's definitely just one book split up into 2 volumes. I feel like I should describe this as Cormac McCarthy's Don DeLillo novel. What we've got here is like a precocious youth and all this math talk. I know these things are interesting to Cormac McCarthy. I know it's not a put on. He's genuinely interested in this type of characterization. But honestly, this reminds me more of like Don DeLillo's The Names and Ratner's Star than Suttree, for instance. So this is a solid novel. I've seen somebody say that this is like his best work. If your opinion of Cormac McCarthy's best work is Stella Maris and The Passenger, you should just read Don DeLillo because you'll probably love him. He's doing everything that you find here, basically. So for me, this is like, let's say it's a B plus. This is between a B and an A tier. It's a really good book. I read it pretty quickly. You're getting a lot of good Cormac McCarthy writing in here, but at the same time, the overall plot and the characters, to me, feel like they were borrowed from Don DeLillo. Now it occurs to me that I've basically made this this video in one take, and I should be trying to split that up a little bit maybe. But what I'm going to do now is just go through again very quickly and give you an idea of where I put everything. Outer Dark, or excuse me, The Orchard Keeper. This is like a C tier for me. Outer Dark is like a B or a B plus. Child of God is like a B or a B plus. Suttree is an S tier book. Blood Meridian is an S tier book. The Border Trilogy is A plus. No Country for Old Men and The Road are C tier books. These are his worst books in my opinion. They do not represent his broader work. The Passenger and Stella Maris are, let's say, B plus. So I hope that gives you guys a take on Cormac McCarthy that might be a little different than the typical Cormac McCarthy take, but that isn't so different it seems off the wall. I don't know exactly what all people are looking for in Cormac McCarthy. I see a lot of people reading Cormac McCarthy who aren't necessarily always interested in the most literate, that's the wrong word for it, who are not always interested in the most contemplative, let's use that word, contemplative novels, and who tend to more value the experience of reading. and kind of the whimsy and fun of that, reading Cormac McCarthy. And I think that's great. I don't think Cormac McCarthy is the end all be all of American literature. I think he's a great writer for the 21st century. I think that Cormac McCarthy's novels will probably live for quite a while, and they completely merit that. But other than that, that's everything. I loved reading McCarthy. I just maybe my take is a little bit different than some people, or maybe I'm being too hard on certain other works in his oeuvre that are valued by other people. If this is a sink or swim moment for my channel reviewing Cormac McCarthy, I don't think that I have a lot of time left making videos, but hopefully there will be people who see my video and think, you know what, I don't have to love absolutely everything by Cormac McCarthy. And he is really good. That doesn't have to be superlative. All right, guys. Thanks for everything. I'm Mark. This is Several Books. Please like and subscribe, and